If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Michael Lind, academic, University of Texas, author of a book I would recommend called The New Class War. I don't agree with everything Professor Lind has to say in The New Class War or on immigration, but he is a strong intellect. I mean, somebody that whose opinion you need to consider, well-founded arguments, even if they come to different conclusions than I would come to in some cases. He's got a piece out over at Tablet Mag. Infinity is the wrong number of immigrants. Okay. Yeah. I think he's making the headliner writer is making a hyperbolic, making a point in a hyperbolic way. Lind is more grounded. The U.S. needs fewer immigrants, not more. At the present rate of net 1.5 million immigrants a year, which has been the average under the past 5 presidencies, the U.S. population will balloon from 340 million today to 431.5 million by 2100, an increase of nearly 100 million newcomers who are less educated on average and more dependent on welfare and have higher poverty rates than native-born Americans. These newcomers would enter an economy with slow productivity growth by historic standards, in which reading and math scores are declining, rates of unwed motherhood are among the highest in the world, and ever few citizens can afford a traditional middle-class lifestyle. Well, I would just say that that's a lot to project in terms of the next 75 years. Things will stay where they are today in fitting that description. You know, that this is not inexorable over the course of 75 years, that these descriptions should hold true. But okay. He also goes on to say tech companies want more H-1B indentured cubicle workers who are willing to work for less pay and are more subservient to their bosses than American citizens. Agribusiness companies want more indentured foreign serfs to labor in the fields as an alternative to raising wages to attract American workers or investing in labor-saving machinery. Well, there may be some truth to that. But, you know, there's also this cultural issue. Gen Z workers need praise for meeting basic expectations, 71% of managers say. According to a report from Resume Templates, 71% of managers say Gen Z employees expect to be praised for completing basic tasks. Nearly 60% say Gen Z workers still want positive reinforcement, even when their performance falls short. Protect the self-esteem at all costs. 38%. This is really interesting. Just how fragile some are. Not all. Some. Too many. Managers also revealed how Gen Z handles feedback. 38% say Gen Z employees called out sick the day after receiving constructive criticism, while 27% quit their jobs altogether. I mean, that's a little bit of an itchy trigger, isn't it? Others responded by crying, posting on social media, filing complaints with HR, requesting new managers, or involving their parents. One manager telling Resume Templates they can't handle correction or discipline without crying about it and thinking rules and expectations don't apply to them. This was a survey of 1,050 U.S. managers who manage Gen Z employees. So on the one hand, I understand what Michael Lind is saying. On the other hand, you have to give these people trying to run businesses for a profit and necessarily having to replenish their workforces a little bit of a break in terms of what they seem to be dealing with attitudinally. To help us distill all this and discuss other important economic and geopolitical matters, Christopher Whalen is the chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, LLC. He's also the editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst and author of Inflated: Money, Debt, and the American Dream. Chris Whalen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan.
So Trump just kicked up the price of H-1B visas to $100K. That matters in not every state has a significant number of H-1B visa recipients. But for example, New York and Illinois are two of maybe a dozen states that have more than 10,000, according to U.S. citizens and U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services. So it's still a relatively small number, even if it's a multiple of 10,000. But it could be particularly impactful in certain sectors. What's your take on that play?
Well, the ticket to Disney World has to have a price. I have no problem with him setting it high. Everyone in the world would come here, Dan, if they could. Fortunately, we have oceans. But I have no problem with it. I think that we needed reform regarding immigration. The stats that were in your lead-in are kind of shocking, really. It's not that immigration is bad. I'm the child of immigrants.
Yeah.
But we've been here for 250 years. So I look at the world. You have a lot of countries or sort of countries that are disintegrating, and everybody wants to come here and flee whatever is going on in their homeland, and we can't take them all. It's like one of those bad science fiction movies where, certain privileged people are living in the stars and everybody's trying to get up there. We have the same problem because we have free stuff, number one. New York, great example. You have free housing. All you have to do is show up. It's like, give me housing. So, until we change some of those policies, everybody on the planet is going to want to come here.
Well, yes, that's true. But, and by the same token, and just in terms of population projections, the flip side is this. University of New Hampshire analysis finds 5.7 million more childless women of prime childbearing age in 2024 than past trends predicted. Among women under 30, childlessness spiked the hardest. 4 million more women aged 20 to 39 in the country than in 20 years ago. 7 million fewer births. So the other part of this equation is, we're not reproducing, American citizens not reproducing at replacement rate. And the only thing that really has gotten us to replacement rate over the last 2 decades is the people who have immigrated to this country, some illegally, clearly. And so the question, it seems to me, not do we need more immigrants or do we need to continue to allow immigrants in as opposed to sort of shutting down that flow. It's, the sorts of people that we let in and the vetting process and the timeliness of it and so forth. I mean, which is what we've been talking about for generations to no particular positive ends.
No, but I think that's the key. People who come here legally, who do not have violent or criminal backgrounds, why can't we be picky? I see nothing wrong with that, Dan.
Right.
We have a duty to our citizens to only let people into this country who are going to add to our society. We don't need to take everybody's problems, and we certainly don't need to take terrorists and criminals.
Yeah.
So, when President Trump sends them home, I said, bravo.
And of the fragility of Gen Z workers?
Yeah, I was laughing when I was listening to you say that. My dad used to kick the crap out of me. That's how I learned. Tough love.
No sick days?
No sick days, no. When I was a manager, I was privileged to work at Kroll Bond Rating Agency. And when I left, I think I had about 150 people reporting to me, or directly, indirectly. And I didn't mind being a manager. I think you do have to give them a lot more praise than you think, especially when people do good work. You have to focus on those who do good work or are trying to learn, trying to do good work. The rest of them, I think you give them the paddle, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only way you're going to motivate them. And I'll go further. I think you should cut the bottom 5% every year in terms of performance. That's how you motivate people.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
It's basic human instinct. If you don't scare them a little, they're not going to respond.
Well, I mean, it's not being sort of unfair or ogreish. It's just you got to perform to stay here. I got to perform to stay here. You got to perform to stay here. That's how it works, right?
You have to pull the dog sled. Those who are not pulling the dog sled can go do something else. Absolutely right. But look, this current generation, I kind of feel sympathy for them because the confused messages that they're getting from our so-called leaders are just a mess. Imagine you as a young teenager today trying to navigate this work market, trying to, figure out where you fit in the world. I'm sure you and I, Dan, have had to remake ourselves several times during our lifetimes.
Yeah, I was going to be a break dancer. Yeah.
Well, I could be a gardener. I'm really good at roses. But you know what I'm saying? To teach people that skill and the humility that you have to realize that what you've been doing isn't going to work in the future, and you got to go do something else. That's a tough choice.
Your buddy Chuck Schumer was on State of the Union over the weekend, and he was pressed on his lethargy in coming around to support Zohran Mamdani for mayor, like so many other dutiful politicos in New York, starting with the governor, have done. This was that exchange. Pretty fun, actually, which I don't get to say very much about Dana Bash hosted programs.
Okay, well, first of all, I know him. We've had a good relationship in the past, and we had a good meeting 2 weeks ago, a very long meeting with a lot of serious questions, and all I can tell you is I'm going to continue talking to him.
What's the holdup?
I got to continue talking to him, and that's what I'm going to do.
Is part of the calculus that if you endorse a Democratic socialist, you're worried it will be damaging to your party, maybe even your chances of winning back the Senate?
I'm going to continue talking to him. Dana, you can ask me again.
All right. Had to try, Senator. I really
appreciate it. Has he run that by, who are his imaginary friends again? I forgot their names. Bill and Joe and Eileen, what's the last name? Bailey? Joe and Eileen Bailey? His imaginary friends. Yeah. Anyway, why so slow on the uptake for Mamdani there with Chucky Schumer?
Well, Mamdani and AOC and the rest of them on the far left of the Democratic Party are destroying the party. They are going to force a schism among Democrats that I think is, probably the most significant political change we've seen in this country in a century. And it's going to benefit the Republicans. The Republicans could end up being the majority party in this country for a generation, simply because, you notice the Democratic leader in New York rejected Mamdani because he can count. Kathy Hochul, our accidental governor, she has no choice because she has no base. Had it not been for Andrew Cuomo's little foibles, she would never be sitting in that seat. She was a purely decorative lieutenant governor, and now she's got to figure out a way to put together a coalition so she could win. I think the Republicans have a chance of knocking the governor out in New York.
You think Stefanik could win?
Oh, yeah, because of exactly this conversation. There's not a majority in New York State for a socialist agenda. You have people living in privation in New York City. You and I have talked about this. We should be moving low-income families out of New York. There is no way to make that affordable. And even this character Mamdani, who is obviously very charismatic, but has not a clue what he's doing, despite his political experience. You freeze rent in New York City, all of those assets, all of those rent-stabilized apartments are going to deteriorate and be abandoned by their owners. It's funny. We're seeing the end of the progressive era in New York. If you go back to Robert Moses and everything that he did with the help of Tammany Hall, let's remember, all that's done. And the city can't afford it. The city doesn't even get half of what the apartments that they control, 500,000 apartments, to cost every day. How can they continue that? Are they eventually going to give people free apartments when inflation eats away at their ability to pay for things? That's the underlying context here. The only reason we have a Mamdani is because the Fed hasn't done their job. And frankly, again, Trump and Secretary Bessent are right on target. People don't realize the Federal Reserve Board is the keystone of the progressive world. When Franklin Roosevelt created the Board of Governors in Washington in 1935, he was essentially attacking the Republican vision for a decentralized, apolitical central bank. And instead, he brought it to Washington. And everything is now, controlled by the politicians. So, the Fed has given everybody too much. And even today, I would argue we don't have a recession. We have an inflation problem. This economy is not going to slow down, Dan. This economy is on steroids and heroin.
Well, but that steroids and heroin usually ends in a crash. To your point, and so
yes.
But this is what's so this is really interesting. I mean, just make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the ascent of Mamdani is the death throes of essentially progressivism or leftism in New York. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because the progressivism up till this point has been kind of wishy-washy moderate, like Chuck Schumer. He would vote socialist in Washington, but when he was up here in New York, he would sound like a 1950s New Yorker. He would try and balance those two perspectives. When you have people like AOC and Mamdani out there, they're talking about expropriating private property. They're talking about other kind of Marxist-Leninists policies that we know don't work, but are very popular with people who could just barely make ends meet. When you think about the bottom quarter of New York City households spending 50, 60, 70% of their take-home income on housing, that's not going to work, obviously. And at the same time, the city can't take care of the assets. The apartment buildings are falling into decay and disrepair. So where is the solution here? It's not going to come from Mamdani. All he wants to do is give people pap, just a little smile and a little kiss on the cheek, right? But no real solutions. What's the solution in New York City? We should redevelop the entire city. All of the assets that were built by my ancestors have to go. Think about that. The entire city needs to be redone. Who would live there? Only people with money. I hate to say it.
Well, that's really
the cost of acquiring property and building today.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
Well, that's really interesting. They're projecting like this is the new way, and this is sort of the consummation of the new Marxist takeover of the Democrat Party, and this is where we're going to go. We're going to increase our pace on the road to serfdom, at least in big city America. And what you're saying is this is this is the edge of the cliff, and they're about to fall off, and they don't even realize it. Yeah,
because look at Joe Manchin in West Virginia. He decided to leave the Senate. He's just written a very interesting book. He's a middle of the road Democrat who could have easily become a Republican had he stayed in the Senate. People were expecting that. I think you could see up to a third of Democrats nationally abandon this craziness and cross the aisle and become Republicans.
Do you think
about what that does?
Well, I want to get before we let you go. Our friend Steve Moore says if Mamdani gets elected, which by all accounts he's going to get elected, does Wall Street move to Charlotte or Texas?
They already are.
Is it a formal repudiation more though than the slow move away?
It will accelerate it. Give you a kind of quirky example. There's a big real estate investment trust called Rhythm Capital that's just decided to buy a commercial REIT called Paramount. Where are their assets? New York City. Why would you want to go long New York office space when this character is about to become mayor? JP Morgan just finished their big headquarters on Park Avenue. It looks like something out of the Chronicles of Riddick. But JP Morgan has been moving people out of New York for years, even while they have paid lip service to staying in the city. So the process is only going to accelerate, Dan.
Chris,
why would you stay here? Just so this guy can tax you? Nah.
That's the same thing people in Chicago have been saying for a while and continue to. Chris Whalen, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Inflated. Chris, thanks as always. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan. Have a great day.
You too. And Chris, join us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line. Coming up at 7:07, we'll turn our attention to all things geopolitical with Stephen Bucci. It is now 7 o'clock on AM 560 WIND Chicago.